Hello friends, and welcome back to 5 Agendas. We'll be doing part 11. Studying more of the sanctuary message, the everlasting gospel. And specifically, in this presentation, more on the way, the truth, and the life, being the man in linen. Man in linen's parabolic time clock in Matthew 20. Remember the early morning, 6 a.m., the third hour was 9 a.m., 6th hour was 12 p.m., 9th hour, 3 p.m., 11th hour, 5 p.m., and then when even was come, 6 p.m. So Moses is called to go out of Egypt. Christ our Passover sacrifice for us, and it was between these times that we had the transgression and abomination of desolation from 554 to 1844, which is your 12 p.m. hour. Continuing the 6 a.m. early in the morning. Friends, Moses was given the book of the law for the sanctuary services, which equals the sanctuary message, which equals the everlasting gospel, age long. Here it is in diagram, the everlasting gospel, which corresponds with the way, the truth, and the life. You understand what this service was about, portrayed through these services, and you have a good grasp on the everlasting gospel, and you can start building from there, as I have done. I remember those studies, sitting by the river with the whiteboard, out in nature, drawing these services from Leviticus 4 and 16 on the whiteboard, and understanding those services and what they did and what it all pointed to. And that is what helped me to understand what the 5 Agendas was all about. Sanctuary services performed by the priests were by a divine dictum. God gave them to Moses as an example and shadow. Example, shadow of heavenly things. So if the example and shadow revealed a dual atonement ministration of forgiveness and cleansing. Forgiveness during the daily, Leviticus 4. Cleansing during the yearly, Leviticus 16. 2 agendas in Leviticus 4 during the daily. 3 agendas in Leviticus 16 for the yearly. 5 agendas. An example and shadow of heavenly things. All throughout these services, we have a divine dictum, revealing a system of truth, the everlasting gospel. Moses was also given ancient Israel's annual feasts. You're going to see something very important regarding the sanctuary services and the feasts. These two aspects, the sanctuary service and the feast, which go hand in hand, reveal the everlasting gospel. So, yes, when you understand the sanctuary service, you have and understand the everlasting gospel. But it's also the feasts. Don't forget the feasts are a part of that everlasting gospel. Because it's those feasts that reveal the two immutable things. And if you're not familiar with the two immutable things, videos on this same YouTube channel. If you go to the main page and you click on videos, scroll down, or click on playlists, there's several videos there on the two immutable things. And you know what? I'll never get tired of studying and learning more about the two immutable things. The everlasting gospel, the example and shadow. This service right here was an example and shadow of heavenly things. Revealing the way, the truth, and the life. And when the way, the truth, and the life came, he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And it was those services that were given to ancient Israel. And when the way, the truth, and the life came, they didn't know him. So, God forbid that that should happen to us. Ancient Israel's annual feasts. The everlasting gospel as well. So we have the spring feasts, which were Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Pentecost. Separated in time, then you had the fall feasts, trumpets, Day of Atonement, and tabernacles. These feasts were not celebrated in the spring, and the spring feasts were not celebrated in the fall. That's why they're called the spring feasts and the fall feasts. And the huge point about this is, when you say the day the atonement was complete at Calvary, no dual atonement, it was all finished at the cross, you're basically saying that the Day of Atonement was kept at the time of Passover in the spring. Doesn't happen. In type or antitype. I repeat, these two aspects, the sanctuary service and the feast, go hand in hand and reveal the everlasting gospel. We read in Leviticus 23:37, God said, These are the feasts of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations. The feasts of the Lord, he told them, proclaim to be holy convocations. What was the reason, the purpose, and what were they to do? The feasts were to offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord, a burnt offering and a meat offering, a sacrifice and a drink offerings, everything upon his day. Now, we did a couple thought papers that you find on 5agendas.com. Scroll down, newsletters tab, scroll down and you'll find the thought papers on the feasts. There's a chart, which we'll be getting to shortly. We did a video that you'll find on this same YouTube channel under the videos tab, and also in the playlist. There's just the one video under that one playlist for the feasts. Have a look at it. The huge point about the feast is that God said the feasts of the Lord were to offer an offering made by fire, a burnt offering, meat offering, sacrifice, drink offerings. So when he fulfilled Passover, himself being the Passover, Christ our Passover sacrifice for us, when he fulfilled unleavened bread, first fruits, Pentecost, in the spring, the beginning of the gospel age, in 31 AD. And then in the 1840s, trumpets signaling the coming Day of Atonement. 1844, the commencement of the antitypical yearly high priestly administration of Christ our great high priest after the order of Melchizedek in the heavenly sanctuary, not made with hands. The fall feast in type. In antitype, the fall represents the end of the age. Okay? And when he fulfilled those, they were not to be kept again. Christ our Passover was sacrificed for us. How could you celebrate Passover without, because the feasts here were to offer an offering, so how could you keep the Passover truly the way it was God commanded it to be kept, to offer an offering when that offering was once for all? The offering was once for all, not the atonement. So you can't keep the Passover the way God meant it unless you set up your own feast, which is kind of scary. You can't keep it without offering an offering, and to do so would be deny Christ our Passover. But there is another way to keep it, and that's what the New Testament is revealing. And the feasts are important, and we're not advocating to, join the feast-keeping crowd and movement. Okay? The important thing is to remember and be keeping them the way Paul told us to. Again, the everlasting gospel, the way, the truth, and the life. And this is why the everlasting gospel is revealed in the spring feast, Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Pentecost, trumpets, Day of Atonement, and tabernacles. So let's look more into detail of the feasts coming up. And these 2 points, the sanctuary service and the feasts, because as we have been saying, I'll just pull it up here, John 19:30. When Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, "It is finished." The book of Hebrews and the sanctuary services and the feasts, the everlasting gospel, is saying the atonement could not have been what was, "It is finished." So what was finished? The sanctuary service, the feasts, the sacrifices, and Christ condemned sin in the flesh. Those 4 things can be identified as what Jesus meant when he said, "It is finished." To say otherwise, that the atonement was complete at the cross, is to trample the everlasting gospel, the sanctuary service, the feast, the two immutable things, the whole book of Hebrews, and the Bible as a whole underfoot, because the evidence is that the atonement was not complete at the cross. And this is why the 2 ministrations for the daily and the yearly, 2 atonements, is revealed in that sanctuary service, and the feasts play a part of that. So the everlasting gospel through the sanctuary services, because what was done here when the individual brought that lamb represented the Lamb of God at the altar in the court, the cross. The everlasting gospel, because that sanctuary service was an example and shadow of heavenly things. Let this sink in. The sanctuary service pointed to Christ on the cross and Christ's high priestly administration. So here you have 2 things. 1, 2. So let's have a look at this and how it corresponds with the 2 immutable things in Hebrews 6:18. 1, 2. Atonement 1, atonement 2. 2 atonements, a dual atonement. 2 immutable things. Because these 2 immutable things point us to these 2 ministrations. His once for all sacrifice and his high priestly ministration. A final, antitypical final atonement. The first immutable thing says, "Thou art my son, today have I begotten thee," in Hebrews 5:5. Thou art my son, the first immutable thing, which Hebrews 6 reveals as the counsel from Psalms 2:7. I will declare the decree, the Lord has said unto me, Thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee. 4, John 3:16 says, For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Okay? And there's more about this in the playlist. There's the videos on the two immutable things. I would encourage you to go have a look at them. The second, that's still the first immutable thing, Hebrews 8:3. It is of necessity, see, Hebrews 8:3 is the first immutable thing. It is of necessity that this man have somewhat also to offer. Necessity, and then we're going to see that the necessary in Hebrews 9:23 points to his high priestly ministration, the second immutable thing, where he is our great high priest after the order of Melchizedek. That's the first immutable thing. The second immutable thing, thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. So this was the counsel, a son by decree. The second immutable thing is the oath. Psalms 110:4. Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Because Hebrews 5:5 is the first immutable, Hebrews 5:6 is the second immutable concerning Melchizedek. 2 immutable things. It's just that simple. And so Hebrews 8:3 is the first immutable thing. Hebrews 9:23 is the second immutable thing, which says it was therefore necessary. So here's the necessity and here's the necessary, that the patterns of things in the heavens should be purified with these. It was therefore necessary that the patterns, these patterns of things in the heavens should be purified with these. Animal blood right there. But the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices, plural, than these. Because don't forget, the Father gave his only begotten Son, and Christ, our Passover, sacrifice for us. He gave his life for us. Where do you find this in the type? The mingling of the blood of the bullock and the Lord's goat. In that last act of the final, that last act of atonement there in the type on the Day of Atonement. Antitypically, it's the last act of the antitypical Day of Atonement. It's for the individual. That means it's for you and me. First immutable, second immutable. That by 2 immutable things. Right there. In which it was impossible for God to lie. What's the only thing that God cannot do? Lie. Impossible. We might have a strong consolation. These 2 things are our strong consolation. Who have fled for refuge to lay hold upon the hope set before us. Look, these 2 things set before us. Which hope we have as an anchor of the soul. These 2 immutable things. A dual atonement. Necessity and necessary. An anchor of the soul. Both sure and steadfast. And which entereth into that within the veil, the heavenly sanctuary. Whither the forerunner, right here, is for us entered. Jesus, the man in linen. Made an high priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek. Who was Melchizedek? Without father, without mother, without beginning of days or end of life. Made like unto the Son of God. Melchizedek, first being by interpretation, means King of Righteousness. Who else? But the Logos, the Word, prior to Bethlehem. And after that also King of Salem, which is King of Peace. No one else fits the description. Because remember, Paul said in Hebrews 7, of whom it is witnessed that he liveth. Who else was Paul going about witnessing that was still alive and living? Melchizedek. Christ. The everlasting gospel, revealed in the spring and fall feasts. The sanctuary service, the everlasting gospel. But look how these fall feasts, the trumpets, Day of Atonement, tabernacles, because trumpets, Christ fulfilled in the 1840s, signaling the coming commencement of the Day of Atonement in 1844 at the end of the 2300 and the 1290 years. Trumpets represented the service in the most holy place. Day of Atonement, the high priest in the type went in and worked his way out. Okay, they're linked. Type feasts were a shadow. Passover, Christ our Passover sacrifice for us, once for all, sacrifice, offering of necessity. This is the antitypical or heavenly. Christ fulfilled it. He said in Matthew 5:17, I'm not come to destroy, but to fulfill. Check mark. Passover. Christ died. Unleavened bread. Spring feast, both these. Christ's burial, he condemned sin in the flesh, not suffered to see corruption. Check. First fruits, spring feast. Christ's resurrection, Christ the first fruits, firstborn from the dead. See how everything matches up? And there's no lack of evidence. Check, fulfilled. The last spring feast, Feast of Weeks or Pentecost, a spiritual harvest by Christ of about 3,000 souls to the new and living way by sending his Holy Spirit. Look up these texts. Check, fulfilled. Those were the spring feasts. The first fall feast came later. These were the beginning of the gospel age. Now, what began the end of the gospel age was the Feast of Trumpets. Fall feast, a trumpet call. See, the seventh month movement, by a loud voice to alert a people about the coming ministration by Christ, our great high priest in the heavenly sanctuary. Hebrews 9:23. There's your necessary. Check. Day of Atonement, fall feast, the final atonements, necessary cleansing, foretold by Christ unto 2300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed, and a people. Proven by two chronologies, the 1290 and the 2300, which both the man and linen said, by its link to the daily, and the transgression against it, unto when? Unto 2300 days, 1844. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And that's in process right now. And the last fall feast, Feast of Tabernacles, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and the saints possess the kingdom, yet to be fulfilled. Spring feasts, fall feasts, beginning of the gospel age, starting the end of the gospel age. These are the feasts of the Lord which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations. So the feasts of the Lord were to offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord, a burnt offering, a meat offering, a sacrifice. Can you keep any of the feasts without a sacrifice? No. Every single feast required a sacrifice, an offering. And drink offerings, everything upon his day. These are the appointed feasts of the Lord which ye shall proclaim as times of holy convocation for presenting to the Lord offerings by fire, burnt offerings and cereal offerings, sacrifices and drink offerings, each on its proper day, from the RSV. Such are the fixed festivals of the eternal, which you must proclaim as sacred gatherings for making fire offerings to the eternal, burnt offerings, cereal offerings, sacrifices and libations, each on its proper day, from Moffat translation. Here we saw that the sanctuary services and the feasts equal the everlasting gospel. The everlasting gospel, linked, chained with a chain of truth. The first immutable, remember ye the law of Moses my servant. What are we to remember? The sanctuary services, the feasts. Why? Because when this was said in Malachi, when God told Malachi, in Malachi here 4:4, remember ye the law of Moses my servant. Remember? Why? Because it's going to be important later. When the first angels has the everlasting gospel to preach unto every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come. There's your 1844. And worship him that made. Oneness and duality. Remember ye the law of Moses my servant, which I commanded unto him in Horeb, for all Israel, with the statutes and judgments. Remember them, study them. Purge out therefore the old leaven, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 5:7, that ye may be a new lump. Purge out the old leaven. It's about a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For even Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us. He fulfilled the feast of Passover. Purge out the old leaven. There's going to be a new lump. There's going to be a new keeping of the feast, spiritually, by remembering, by knowing what he's doing, how he fulfilled the feast, antitypically. Therefore let us keep the feast, Paul says, not with the old leaven. So let us keep the feast. But we already know from Leviticus that we can't keep the feast, literally without a sacrifice and drink offering and so forth. So Paul says, let us keep the feast, not with the old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. That sincerity and truth is the spiritual keeping of the feast, not with the old leaven. What does that mean? Well, remember Matthew 16:6, Jesus said, then Jesus said unto them, take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it is because we have taken no bread. Which when Jesus perceived, he said unto them, O ye of little faith, why reason ye among yourselves, because ye have brought no bread? Do ye not yet understand, neither remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000, and how many baskets ye took up? Neither the 7 loaves of the 4,000, and how many baskets ye took up? How is it that ye do not understand that I spake it not to you concerning bread, that you should beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees? Ah, then understood they how that he bade them not beware of the leaven of bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees. So here, Christ linked the leaven of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees, meaning the doctrine. So let us keep the feast, not with the old leaven, the old literal feast keeping, not with malice and wickedness, but it concerns an unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. The truth is, Christ has fulfilled the spring feast. He's fulfilled the first fall feast. He's in the process right now of the 6th feast. And then comes the 7th, the last fall feast, Tabernacles. Think not that I am come to destroy the law of the prophets. And he didn't. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. He has, and he is. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. See? Fulfilled. In the process, yet to be fulfilled. It's just that simple. Wherefore, holy brethren, partakers of the heavenly calling, consider, and this is this sincerity and truth. Here's this leaven. Let us keep the feast by considering the apostle and high priest of our profession, Jesus Christ, the 2 immutable things, considering our great high priest after the order of Melchizedek and what he's doing, the 6th feast, the antitypical yearly, final day of atonement, antitypical, in the heavenly sanctuary, not made with hands right now, the necessary cleansing. Consider the apostle and high priest of our profession, Christ Jesus. And in review, Leviticus 4, and we've done some videos, and there's these charts and thought papers that we've done on this that you can find on the website and YouTube channel. This was a Bible student's analysis of Leviticus 4, because when you go through it, you had first the priest that is anointed, and this can be printed off, the chart that's with the accompanying thought paper on Leviticus 4, the officiating high or common priest, and you can write in there who did it, the location of where the blood was placed, and the results for the priest, the whole congregation, which were both two corporate categories, and then the ruler and the common people were both individual categories. Okay? And you'll see that in Leviticus 4, the daily ministration, if it was the disposition of blood, for it was a congregational sin caused by the high priest, which was a corporate category, the blood was sprinkled before the veil, placed on the horns of the altar of incense, and poured at the base. The second corporate category, for the whole congregation, same thing. There, poured at the base. But when it came to the individual category, a ruler, look, it wasn't taken. God is saying, look, only corporate is dealt with in here, and only individual is dealt with here. See, it's only for the two corporate categories, it's poured on the base. It's never put on the horns of the altar, here. But for the individual, it's put on the horns and sprinkled here. Never taken in. Common person, you and me. Put on the horns, sprinkled here. Never taken in. And when you understand that, you'll be able to understand that when it comes to the 5 agendas, Calvary, individual forgiveness. No, sorry, here. Individual forgiveness. Okay? First agenda. Second agenda, corporate cleansing. That was taken care of in here. And that has to do with 7 churches. Revelation. Post-Calvary. Now, when it comes to the third agenda, reconciliation of the heavens, the Day of Atonement, when the high priest and the type went into the most holy place, Christ was doing this ministration from 1844 on. Okay? That's the third agenda. The fourth agenda, corporate cleansing. And the fifth agenda, individual cleansing, out here for the individual. Okay? Here you could actually pause this and read through this, because in Leviticus 16, we just talked about Leviticus 4, Leviticus 16 is the yearly ministration. And this shows you the first entrance into the second apartment was represented by these red dots. Observe the red dots, okay, for the blood of the bullock, placed here, here, and here. And then for the second entrance, represented by the blue dots, placed here and here and here, just like the first entrance. But when it came to the mingling of the blood of the bullock and the blood of the Lord's goat, okay, it was mingled here, represented by the green dots. So there's 3 phases of the atonement administration. Step 1, most holy place. Step 2, holy place. And step 3, altar in the court. Have a look at this. To be continued for the 6 a.m. early in the morning hour. So I hope this helps. Please see part 12, which will be coming up soon next. God bless. See you next time.